Okay, let's get started. So welcome everyone to the final session of the 2021 Teaching and Learning Symposium. I hope you've been having a really great 2.5 days. Just a reminder that if you require closed captioning, the instructions for turning it on are on the screen now. And if there's anything else we can do to improve your access, please feel free to reach out to us. The chat is on and available throughout the session, and we're looking forward to your engagement. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Allison Gibbs. I'm the director of CTSI, and I'm now going to invite Vice President and Provost Professor Cheryl Regier to start the session.
Good afternoon. Thanks very much, Allison. Let me begin by commending all of you for being a part of this seminar. In this world where we're all zoomed to death, it's truly remarkable that you've spent this time focusing on teaching and learning. But what I heard from the chatter at the beginning, this has been a really rewarding experience and quite rejuvenating. So you have fabulous teachers setting up a teaching environment, and it shouldn't be surprising that it inspires people. Next, let me express my tremendous gratitude to all of you for the incredible work that you've been doing this year in terms of teaching innovation and supporting our students. You know what's happened in the last year, but just to run through it again, as you well know, there was that amazing weekend in March last year where 6,000 University of Toronto courses suddenly went online. In the summer of 2020, we had a record number of students registering for classes and unbelievable number who stayed here in Toronto, but also those who took this as an opportunity to expand their learning by taking courses from around the world. And last night I presented the key performance indicators to governance, and I reported that the number of registrations in online courses went from 9,500 in the fall of 2019 to over 500,000 in the fall of 2020. So that is like an enormous shift. Unbelievable that had happened, and just an amazing testament to all your work. And I often think about, well, how was this incredible feat accomplished? And it's because of the dedicated teachers like you that we have here today. So I know that you developed instant seminars for colleagues and helped them use platforms they weren't familiar with, functions that they had seen the buttons on those platforms but had never used. And helping them find new tools for collaboration and other things. So the innovation has been stunning, and I've read with great pride and interest the kind of things that you've been doing. We've been hearing about labs in a box that are delivered to students' homes, online simulations that have been developed, items that have been 3D printed like bat skulls and sent out, interactive groups and learning activities, and really inspired videos and lectures. And on top of all of that, I'm really aware that you made your students feel cared for. You brought them into your homes, virtually, of course. You introduced them to your pets, and you showed tremendous flexibility and compassion when their life situations interfered with their learning. And I know that our students appreciated it because they tweeted about it, they commented about it in governance meetings that I attend, and they told me in the regular meetings that I have with student leaders about how important this was for them. So let me just say thank you. I have never felt prouder to work at this university than as I saw with the kind of work that you've been doing. When I do meet with student leaders, they usually use it as an opportunity to tell me about things that they're less happy with. That's the nature of people getting time to meet And so there's no doubt that our students are excited, anxious, desperate to get back to in-person types of activities. They want to learn together. They want to meet you in person. But they're also very concerned that the gains that have been made in online teaching aren't going to continue. And they're worried about losing the flexibility, and they're worried about some of the great innovations you put in place that have helped their learning. So always looking at the upside when people come with concerns. I think this is another testament to your creativity and the kind of work you've been doing. Students, while they want to be together, they are worried about losing the great types of opportunities that they've had in this last year. So I know that your last plenary is going to be looking at this, and as we move into a post-pandemic world, you have all kinds of ideas about what we can gain from what we learned, what we should keep, and what we'll be glad to get rid of, because at the end of COVID, we never want to do that again. I also know that it's been a really grueling year. And I know that you've worked hard to support your students in these uncertain times. I know that you've had to juggle all kinds of things in order to make this happen. I've been talking with people who have juggled children, who have communicated with somebody who was recording lectures in a tent in their basement after their children went to sleep. And I know that there's just been tremendous accommodation and efforts that you've had to make. And then as this pandemic has relentlessly gone on, I know that it's really hard for people to maintain their energy and enthusiasm. So again, coming together today, that's spectacular, wonderful that you're still enthusiastic about teaching and you're willing to share your enthusiasm with one another and find ways to get through this. My current obsession is hashtag how's my flattening. I don't know if other people watch that every day. And today it told me that over 54% of eligible Ontarians have received their first vaccine. So that and the fabulous weather just fills me with tremendous hope. But the hope really comes from the kind of energy and enthusiasm that you and others have brought to the challenge. So let me close by thanking the Center for Teaching Support and Innovation, the Desautels Center, and the Rotman School of Management for helping organize all of this, the 100 presenters who were engaged, and again, all of you for everything that you've been doing and for coming together again and sharing your insights with one another. I just want to let you know that your efforts have not gone unnoticed, not by me, not by others, and certainly not by the students. And I'm so deeply grateful for all that you've been doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. And what a great introduction, and really setting the stage for the conversation that is to come now. So it's my pleasure now to introduce the panelists who very graciously agreed to offer their reflections on their experiences of teaching and of learning this past year, and also their ideas and vision for what's going to come next. So I'll start with our panelists. Maybe I'll ask you to wave or say hello as I introduce you. So first of all, Stéphane Martin Demers, an undergraduate student or just finishing his undergraduate in the Faculty of Music. Stéphane is also a student governor on the U of T Governing Council and is a student representative on the U of T Student Equity Census Advisory Roundtable and president of the Faculty of Music Anti-Racism Alliance. So welcome, Stéphane.
Everyone.
Our next panelist, Emmanuel Estrate, is an assistant professor in the teaching stream at Victoria College. And as the Teaching with Technology Coordinator, Emmanuel supported Victoria College instructors in teaching this past year, and he's worked actively to capture the experience of instructors and students. Thanks, Emmanuel. And Fiona Rawl is an associate professor in the teaching stream in biology and the associate dean undergraduate at UTM. Fiona is a recipient of the President's Teaching Award and a member of the Toronto Initiative for Diversity and Excellence. Thanks, Fiona. And moderating our panel today, we have Greg Evans. Greg is a professor in chemical engineering and applied chemistry and director of the Institute for Studies in Transdisciplinary Engineering Education and Practice. Quite a mouthful. Greg is a 3M National Teaching Fellow and a member of the President's Teaching Academy. And Samantha Chang is a PhD candidate from the Department of Art History, and she's the micro teaching coordinator in the TA training program. And Sam is our most recent recipient of the TATP Course Instructor Teaching Excellence Award. So I think now I'll pass it to Samantha and Greg, and I think Samantha.
Thank you so much, Allison, for the introductions. And I'm just so happy to see many friendly faces and names in the audience today. So over the past 3 days, I enjoyed listening to the experiences and observations from faculty members, staff, and students across the university. The pandemic and social movements of the past year offer us the opportunity to critically reflect on the why and the how in teaching and learning. Why is this learning technology used? Why is this assessment or reading assigned? How do we support instructors, staff, and students? How do we recognize the impact on learning? All of this boils down to intentionality, intentional teaching and learning. I noticed that this past year, I've engaged in more intentional collaborative conversations about teaching and learning than in prior years. Despite the challenges and obstacles of 2020 and 2021, faculty, staff, and students have partnered up to co-create authentic learning and systems of care. And I'll pass things over to Greg.
Well, thank you, Samantha. And I'll also echo the words of our provost about that remarkable transition last March. I think it was really a tribute to the adaptability of the instructors and the students and staff, and really the capacity of U of T for teaching and learning. So I think it's something, the way that we've managed to navigate this, the way we've managed to innovate has been really inspirational. Certainly over the last year and at this conference as well, a number of themes have emerged, and we're only going to be able to touch on a very few through this panel. We'll touch on community, flexibility, and well-being. Each theme is going to be introduced by one of the panelists, and then the second panelist will act as a respondent. However, you all play a key role in the conversation, so I very much encourage you to use the chat to put in your questions and comments so that we can gather them at the end of each topic and use this to probe a bit deeper in a collective way. I'll emphasize that the goal of this panel is really to take stock in what we have learned over the last year, what we've learned at the symposium, to encourage individual and collective reflection. So in the end, rather than step back, we can step forward into a whole new level for teaching and learning at our university. Again, this requires your involvement, so we really encourage you to use the chat throughout the sessions, and we are going to do our best to gather as much of this as possible. We got a team working on this to try to synthesize it down to make it a vibrant discussion that'll be part of the Q&A at the end. So our first topic is going to be community, and this was certainly one of the main learnings for me of how essential community is to teaching and learning at our university. And it's really the inherent advantage and the joy of in-person learning. So if we have a university that is inherently a learning community, how can we better leverage this once that we're back all in person? I'll put this as a question to Fiona. So what have you learned about community and at our university, and how might we take this forward? So I'll pass it over to Fiona.
Thanks, Greg. So for me, when I hear the word community, I think meaningful connection. We need meaningful points of connection to hold our community together. And when I think about what brings me joy in my job, it's the people, it's the students I interact with and collaborate with, it's the fellow colleagues, it's these amazing humans that I get to work with. And we want that feeling of connection and joy to transcend our courses. We could take an analytical and look at the science of learning. We know from the science of learning that students learn better when they feel a sense of community. They learn better when they have a meaningful sense of connection between other students and also their professor. And so much about teaching is relationship building. But if we go beyond the analytical science of learning, just to think about joy and enjoyment of learning, I think that's really important, and feeling supported. I know we're going to talk about wellness later on, but a sense of community is so important for supporting wellness. So I wanted to talk about a few things I experienced in my introductory biology class. This was 1,000 students spread all over the world. And we had to be really intentional, using that word that Samantha just used, intentional about creating opportunities for connection and being really deliberate about that. And I know that folks were saying they really miss people and miss seeing people. But one thing that came out for me was sometimes there's more opportunities for connection when you're online. And I was going to tell you just a little anecdote. So I was in office hours, and with a class of 1,000, usually 20 to 25 students come to office hours. They drop in and out, or they just stay and listen. And one day there was one student left, didn't have any more questions, and there were 5 or 10 minutes to go. And I said, we could have a conversation about anything. It doesn't have to be about the class. And this student paused, and then they said, could I introduce you to my family? And he turned on his camera, and I met mom and dad and a grandparent and a neighbor. And this student was on the other side of the world. And there were tears shed, and it was a really joyful moment that wouldn't have happened because we didn't do online office hours the same way before. So when we think about being intentional, like Sam was saying, and to go back to what our provost was saying about students are worried some of that flexibility might disappear, I think we need to be intentional about how we create community and make sure we're creating community for everyone. Because there's no going back to normal. And so I see that word in the news, and sometimes that bothers me because we have a shared experience where some things we struggled with, but some things were better. And so what I don't want to go back to normal is how we run some student supports. So there should always be an online version of advising and an online version of office hours so that students can access that support. But also, I want to think about community for faculty. So as part of my associate dean role, I collaborate with the Teaching and Learning Collaboration, which is a community of practice for faculty development at UTM. And one thing that was added was these weekly office hours that were supported by so many folks from educational technology, our educational developers, INITS, because faculty need support too. So if we are really deliberate about cultivating connections and community, I want to make sure we think of faculty in that narrative as well. So just like how students need office hours, faculty need that as well. And that came for me. So moving forward, I would say that connection is the way forward, and we need to be really deliberate about how we cultivate that.
Wonderful, thank you. I'll ask Emmanuel now to comment and take us a bit further into this idea of community.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you, Fiona, for all the insightful thoughts about what we can do and especially what we should be doing going forward. The one thing that resonated with me, better ways to keep the community going. Out of some of the surveys we've done at Victoria College, one thing that came out is all the extra again, the word intentionality, all the extra intentional work that was put into this, especially around group office hours, meaningful discussion board activities to keep the community going. Many professors have done amazing things like running breakout groups before the class starts for the students who come in a bit early to have the opportunity to talk to others. So there's so much that has been done, and we need to keep it going. In terms of some areas where community has been a bit more achieving a community has been a bit more difficult, according to many of the students' responses, were the asynchronous courses, where many students essentially just felt completely isolated from each other. So this is an area where we still need some work to find ways to connect students while during an asynchronous course. And this brings up things like the little things, asking small questions in an in-person class. You can just lean over and ask, "What did the prof just say? I missed that." In an asynchronous course, there's no person where you can ask an immediate question, get an immediate answer. And even in a synchronous course, you kind of have to interrupt the whole class. So this gets a bit difficult, maybe a bit embarrassing, and so on. So there are many things that we still need to find better ways of doing. But we've also figured out many things that have worked quite well, and all the effort that was put by the instructors and the students also have put in a lot of effort, was has allowed things to work quite well this year. Thank you.
Wonderful. So I do see questions coming in on the chat. Certainly there is one theme of the idea of how being online has better allowed us to collaborate with people and make relationships across the university. And that's one aspect. But there is the other part to it, which is the idea that being online has increased the workload for us as faculty, certainly for us as students as well. And I know we will touch on this in some of the other themes, but I'll put it to you, Emmanuel. How do you think we could continue this idea of being able to better collaborate because of maintaining some type of online after the pandemic ends?
Yes, thank you. I guess there are many things that come to mind. To me, one of the maybe an easier one would be to continue with online office hours or online group office hours. We've had many students who said, actually, office hours this year are better because I used to have to take the train just to come and see the professor. I no longer have to do that. So so that is maybe an easy thing to continue, and maybe this is one thing that can be done, actually join both. Whoever can come to an office hour in person can do so, and whoever can come online is welcome to do that. There's been a lot of effort put into discussion board activities, which in my experience some students have liked and some students have not liked as much. They've liked the ability to discuss offline or outside of class time, but they didn't like the recurring deadline. So how can we have a more meaningful discussion board activity? I think the discussion boards are something that I definitely for my own courses want to keep doing and improve and find a balance where it doesn't feel like a recurring deadline, but it does help bring out more voices in our classes.
Wonderful. Fiona, do you have any additional thoughts on what we might be able to continue to build this idea of collaboration?
Yeah, I think echoing what Emmanuel was saying about online, making student choice in collaboration, I think is really important from a universal design for learning perspective. So students can choose to come see you in person in office hours, or they can choose to come see you during the online office hours. So I think just going back to this being deliberate and being intentional and remembering to have options for student choice.
Yeah, certainly it's the options, and I think we've all experienced having this wide range of options. People are pointing out that the attendance at the symposium is up probably because it's online. We've seen the same in webinars from around the world. Suddenly the global community is a lot smaller because we can all participate together, and that's just wonderful. But the downside is all these opportunities and the sense that there's just so much more we can do, and people feel pressure to do more as well. So would either of you like to take a shot at that? How do we find a new balance to go along with these new opportunities? And it's a loaded question, I agree.
I could say a little bit about that. There was a comment earlier in the chat saying, how can we be expected to do it all? And we can't. And so I think we need to make, again, deliberate choices about where we put our energy. And if we're part of a community, maybe some of that workload can be spread around the community. And so, so we're probably going to talk about wellness and student workload in a bit, but if you're part of a program where students take almost all the same first-year courses, having a community with all of those first-year instructors so that you know when midterms are due, you know how things are being structured in other courses. So maybe there can be some similarities between the courses, because that will help to decrease student cognitive load, or make sure not all the midterms are scheduled on the same day, for example, just to spread things out for students. But it comes back to what Samantha said at the beginning, which is so important about being intentional.
So with that, I'll pass it back to Samantha, who can introduce our second topic.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I really like the discussion around making these deliberate choices and also setting our boundaries and having options of where we're going to put in our energy, what events, what webinars can we actually attend. And I love that idea of working together, all the first year faculty working together. I'm sure all the students will be very appreciative of this. I know I certainly would be. And as we can see from this very brief discussion, communities are very dynamic, whether it's between faculty, staff, students, and in between. And teachers and learners have multiple identities. So how do we create this safe, equitable, and accessible learning communities, be it online or in person? And these questions lead us to our next theme, which is flexibility. So teaching and learning are not the same as following a recipe. Instead, flexibility and adaptability, theme of our keynote, allow both teachers and learners to flourish. And flexibility is at the core of the universal design for learning, which Fiona just mentioned, and the principles of inclusive pedagogy. So at this time, I would like to invite two of our panelists, Emmanuel and Stefan, to share their observations on the importance of flexibility in pedagogical design and learning experience. How does flexibility generate more opportunities for inclusion in the learning environment? So Emmanuel.
Yes, thank you very much. And I think this is one of the most important things we have to address carefully. And flexibility can be done in so many ways. Again, I'm responding a lot based on some surveys we've done at Victoria College. And one of the things that many students have addressed is flexibility with deadlines. So this is, should we say, a more narrow definition of what we mean by flexibility, but being flexible with deadlines, especially this year, has been very difficult for many students. And I know both from my courses and also from these surveys that so many of the students have asked for compassion and have asked for flexibility there. But there's more to flexibility than just a deadline and when something is due. With our courses online this year, we've made many choices. Back in September, we had the choice between dual delivery versus online only. And then with online, we had synchronous and asynchronous. And especially from these choices, One message that stood out is that we definitely do not have a one-size-fits-all type situation here. Like you can't just say this is the best way to go forward. There's been such diverse student opinions. Some students absolutely loved asynchronous courses, saying it gives me a bit of control back to my life. Everything else is taken away from me, and at least I can control when I do what type of work. And other students have been so strongly against asynchronous due to the lack of community, due to the lack of interactivity, and so on. So we need to recognize this, and this, as has been said already, with the ideas of universal design for learning, is nothing new. We've always talked, or we've talked for a long time now, about having to give people multiple ways to do things, multiple opportunities, and this includes multiple opportunities to access material, be it synchronous, asynchronous, and so on. Multiple ways to do their assessments, do their assignments, when there's been experiments by giving choice between a video submission versus a written submission. And also multiple ways of interacting with each other, back to the community. The chat has been has been recognized by many students as being a bit of an equalizer, especially this need to give people multiple opportunities is not just about different learning styles, but it's also different environmental circumstances. Some people have a quiet space, some people do not. Some people have good quality Wi-Fi, and some people do not. So the chat has been a bit of an equalizer for the people who can't immediately turn on the mic, whose sound would probably be very choppy because of bad internet. And things like that. So this flexibility, as I said, is not just because of different learning styles, but a large part of it is that. So going forward, how can we implement better these ideas of giving people multiple opportunities? There's opportunities to kind of combine ideas of synchronous and asynchronous courses, or synchronous, asynchronous course components. Many students talking about asynchronous courses have commented about optional synchronous activities that have been very helpful. Many students commenting about synchronous courses have liked asynchronous components of the course, maybe just a recording of the live lecture so that they can catch up with something that they have missed. So there are opportunities to see how we can expand this idea of giving students multiple opportunities by combining aspects of synchronous, asynchronous, and so on, while at the same time recognizing workload. I think it's been alluded to in this discussion a number of times, and workload is both for the students but also for the instructors. And sometimes this additional flexibility comes with additional workload requirements on the instructor, which is something that we should still keep in mind.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I found that your statement, chat as an equalizer, to be really powerful, and I can see the way it's resonating with all our attendees today via the chat panel. And there's a lot of conversation of, yes, it can be an equalizer, but then also, we also, as instructors, I'm sure you've experienced this. As students, I'm also sure Stefan may have experienced this, is that chat can also be overwhelming. And I think today we've been talking a lot about finding balance and finding choice. So I'm really curious, Stefan, from your perspectives, what has your learning experience been like, and what insights can you provide for us?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And from what I'm hearing with, Emmanuel, what he said so far is that there's different ways that flexibility can be interpreted. On one level, there's workload. Another level, there's pedagogy and course design. And then another, it's like responding to student concerns and student needs. And all of these aren't, separate, they're connected in clear ways. So, I think in one sense, kind of having guidelines, rules set out in a course is fine. And those are usually obeyed without question because that's how it's been done. But we're in a time that we have to really start questioning the status quo and, whether this is still working. And I believe that this is what this session is about. So, really saying if the student needs extra time, and my course policy says 2% late for every day that it isn't submitted, that may have to be adjusted. And professors, instructors have to recognize that. Also, the other demands on students during this time to adjust the workload and rearrange perhaps a number of assignments that are handed out. I know personally, it's felt like there's been a lot more smaller assignments that really test my knowledge of the facts and perhaps not the in-depth analysis that would really help me and other students in the course. But I think on another level, which I also wanted to speak about, is equity and accessibility in course design, insofar as flexibility is related. Just a few of my experiences in the Faculty of Music this past year as a student, but also a leader on campus. It's been difficult to do that virtually, as you can imagine. But this desire to make the courses more equitable, inclusive, accessible for everyone at the faculty, specifically marginalized groups, has been a central aim of the undergraduate student group that I've been a part of, the Faculty of Music Anti-Racism Alliance, and the letter that my undergraduate peers and I sent to the dean of the Faculty of Music to modify existing courses and implement new courses that reflect the need for more diverse material in the curriculum. And I think that there's certain that professors and students, staff, as much as this is an institutional change needs to happen in what is taught and how what is taught is approached to help students better learn the material and thrive in their environment. It is an individual obligation, I believe, that must also be taken. So students, when they're taking courses, to question, why am I being taught this? Why is it being taught at the expense of other groups that one group is perhaps favored? And then for professors to teach their, if there are multiple dimensions and perspectives to a subject, to teach it in the most holistic and representative way possible, to make sure everyone has their due share. So yeah, there's many angles that you can, I really didn't interpret it any one way. I think they're all important. And I think, going back to this idea of being deliberate and intentional, that's really what this individual questioning of what is being taught, how is it being taught, that needs to be always considered.
Thank you, Stefan. I love how you brought up this really critical point that there are many definitions to the term flexibility. And for example, I was thinking about the connections between flexibility and adaptability and also creativity, because I think even just looking at the conversation in the chat panel right now, thinking about the variety of options, and I think Carol had a really good point about thinking of, and I'm scrolling frantically, beware the tyranny of opportunity. And so being flexible and thinking about how much flexibility am I intentionally providing for students, and what are the reasons behind it? And I noticed that in your comments, Stefan, you really highlighted the word why. Why are we studying these content? Why are we doing things in a very specific way, asking these questions? So I really love how both you and Emmanuel have highlighted these points of intentionality, its intersection with building, fostering community through flexible and creative design. I'm scrolling frantically through the chat right now, and if there's something that I'm missing, I'm sure Greg will assist me in pointing it out.
I'll jump in and let you
yes, quickly read.
But I think you've set the theme, and I'll come back to Stefan's nice positioning of the what we're teaching, the how we're teaching, and the who we're teaching, all the elements of flexibility. And I'll put a question to the group that if the genie is now out of the bottle, that we've gone from having this is the way we teach to these are all the possibilities. How do we bring in back this question of intentionality to figure out what really is more effective? We can no longer step back and just say we do it this way because that's the way we've always done it. And students may in the future be looking for the Starbucks of university, where everybody gets their own order, so to speak, and gets to learn in the way that they feel would be best, which again comes back to Carol's comment about the tyranny of opportunity. That simply wouldn't be effective, and it may be very distracting. There's a lot of comments about the chat that way, which really brings up the fallacy of multitasking, the idea that we can concentrate on many things. We just know it's not true, but it's so easy to have that conception that somehow if we're bombarded by information, if we get more information, we're learning more effectively. So I'll throw those thoughts out as challenges to the group, and it touches on some of the themes that have been raised. Do any of the panelists want to try touch? Emmanuel, you want to try taking that one?
Yes, so I guess maybe this is even not so new. I've been looking at the chat discussion about the chat and all of this, and I think it's always happened like this, that you come from an event like the Teaching and Learning Symposium, and even before COVID, and there's so many things that people are doing, and at some point you have to stop and say, what's my purpose? To go back to the opening keynote, what's my purpose with my course? What am I trying to achieve? What are the tools that fit? And also what am I comfortable doing? Some people can multitask and handle the chat and everything else at once, delivering their own class, and some don't. So we need to be also intentional. Why do we choose all these options? There's options, but we need to be careful how we choose, because otherwise we get to that tyranny of opportunity, and at some point we have to be careful. Now, at the same time, asking what options give an advantage to different students, to different learners.
Stefan, would you like to jump in here? Not to put you on the spot, but.
Yeah, so I just wanted to go back to this idea of, burnout and there being, more opportunities for engagement, for collaboration, community. And, this is, I guess, in large part because we still need that and are isolated and trying to connect in whatever ways we can. But I think there is also harm to that, as people in the chat and my fellow panelists have pointed out about it, it being too much. Where do you draw the line? And so I think we also have to think about balance and equilibrium when we think about student engagement, providing opportunities for different methods of learning, asynchronous, synchronous. What works best for who you're teaching, for the format of the course that you've laid out.
Great,
Thank
well,
you.
thank you.
Yeah.
And I'll pass it back to Samantha to introduce our third topic.
Definitely.
Go ahead, Samantha.
Thank you. Just a very brief comment. Emmanuel, thank you for bringing up the keyword purpose. And Stefan, you've also really highlighted the key term people. And I think these are the two elements that we can't forget. We're working with an amazing community of people that was talked about in the keynote, that was talked about in the provost remarks as well. And when thinking about burnout, I found that in the past year, the hardest question to answer for me right now is, how are you? Which on the surface seems like a very simple question, but I don't know how to answer that question honestly anymore. And so the cultivation of teaching and learning communities and the practice of inclusive design through flexibility are reliant on the well-being of both instructors and students. Last week was Mental Health Week in Canada. And the Canadian Mental Health Association's campaign prompted Canadians to hashtag get real about how you feel. So I'd like to invite two of our panelists, Stefan and Fiona, to get real about how their practices and experiences of mental health and well-being shifted amidst this newly complex teaching and learning context. How do we promote and be mindful of mental wellness and workload in our community? So, Stefan.
Yeah, so I think it's firstly important that among instructors in particular, that more compassion and empathy is displayed, because obviously this is not a normal time for anyone. And, students can be going through many things at this time, which, I think professors, they can have an idea of that, but they perhaps forget, that I've had certain professors who haven't accommodated to students' needs, like haven't, granted the extension when perhaps someone really needs it, or lessened on the workload at a particular time when like a major essay is due. So just these small things that can be done that actually do help. And I don't want to, stay in the negative. But just a helpful reminder of some of the things that us students have gone through, and really everyone. The home environment not being suitable for learning. That's an example. Or students, international students being not in the country, their country of origin, studying in different time zones. So one of my professors actually modified the date and time of the office hour to suit everyone. And I know that that's not something that every professor can do, but it does show that they do care about the students' learning. And I think when students see that, they themselves want to learn and to do better in those courses. And also the increase in meetings that I know myself as a student involved in extracurricular activities, going to several meetings every week. You can be in like 5 different places every day, and that just be normal. Like we almost consider it to be normal now. And also to take those needed breaks that you need now, that perhaps before you could go from one to the next because you had those walking breaks in between courses or in between meetings. So you really have to be intentional individually, both instructors and students, about how you are considering your mental health, your well-being, actually inserting those breaks into your schedule, and not just going nonstop. And so for me in particular, just a few things that I have done on an individual basis is, like perform music. That's when I'm not feeling great, because I am a music major. It is sometimes hard to detach the the academic requirement of performance from actual enjoyment, but I can manage. And then, exercise now, sitting down all day in front of a screen, especially when during the busy periods, that is quite difficult, and something that I personally wasn't great at, because I always say to myself to exercise in bouts, but you can just do like 10 to 15 minutes a day. Start slow, get something in there, but going back to instructors, professors, and this shift in keeping in mind students' well-being more at this time. I think the key is to truly listen actively to students' concerns, and to try to understand their situation more deeply. And I think that this shouldn't only be something we work to during the pandemic. And we are thinking about ways moving forward from the pandemic. And I think if the troubles and problems that students have faced indicate anything, it's that they do need more support. And instructors always have to be aware of this.
I really appreciate your comment about active listening, because once again, it goes back to the people's part of the equation, and that we need to hear what people in our community needs if you live in opposite time zone. It's not about being available all the time, but really listening and finding out when do our schedules overlap in a reasonable way, so that we can intentionally connect. I love those ideas. And I know, Fiona, you've written a lot about pedagogy of kindness, and this is a central part of your practice. And I really would love to hear your thoughts about well-being from a faculty member standpoint.
Sure, thanks so much. I had to redial in because we lost power. We've got it back, but our Wi-Fi isn't back on. So if you can't hear me, please let me know and I'll turn off my video. So a few things come to mind when I listen to Stefan and his experience. One is this issue of burnout and workload. And taking a break is easier when your workload is manageable. And so if we care about mental well-being of faculty and students, we really have to consider this. And when you look from a syllabus design perspective, so from a course design perspective, a pedagogy of kindness is not about being nice. It's about having connection and being deliberate about humanizing your course and being trauma aware in how you design your course. And so in one of the discussions earlier, we were talking about flexibility and having lots of options, right? But we cannot do all of the options. So it comes back to student choice. If you ask students to do all of the options, that's not in the interest of their well-being, because they won't have time. So we need to protect time for breaks. And something that I think U of T has done such a good job of is the student mental health support and the redesign of that recently. If you go to the website, it's mentalhealth.utoronto.ca. If you go to that website, they talk about this mental wellness continuum, because talking about mental wellness is something we need to talk about all the time, not just at urgent times of crisis. And considering student wellness and faculty and staff wellness, we want to be considerate of that as we're making decisions about our syllabus. So one easy target is the default submission time is at midnight. Should we perhaps change that when you have an office hour and you're available to answer questions at the time students submit? So that's a very easy change that we could do.
I love that. I know as a graduate student course instructor, I did tell my students, I'm not going to set your deadline at midnight because I'm not going to be grading at 12:01 a.m. So please go to bed and submit the next day. Thank you to Stefan and to Emmanuel and Fiona for sharing your experiences, observation strategies. I'm frantically taking notes about how I can adapt all these considerations into the new academic year, which is only 3 months away. As I mentioned at the start of the session, I'm grateful for the increased opportunities for collaborative and critical conversations about teaching and learning. So I'm really interested in the question, what comes next? So I want to ask our panelists, all three of you, when you look back at the past year, what worked and what didn't? What are some new ways our teaching and learning community can move forward, as Greg mentioned in the beginning? I invite each panelist to share one key insight they have gained and one key action they will take or encourage others to take in the coming year. So maybe this time we'll start with Stefan.
Okay, sure. So I'll continue on this mental health area, I guess. Because I think, what Fiona was just saying there about, actually looking at the syllabus and looking at what's manageable. Because really, this is the key to ensuring that, students can keep up with the course content. And I think that, I want to give a few more details about my experience as well, and just different way. And I think it applies to other students, other people as well, but about pacing yourself and knowing your limits. And I think regardless of the work that you're being given in the course, and whatever other stressors are going on in your life, having an idea of what the next few months is going to look like for you. And if you know that there's going to be, for myself in particular, like March and April was crunch time. And, I have a feeling that many people were falling off the rails, losing motivation. It was just increasingly tough to stay on board. But, just ending the school year, graduating, really wanting to finish. So that feeling of senioritis, what we undergraduates finishing our degree call the lack of motivation that we feel towards the end. And, just finishing up the extracurricular commitments as meetings increasingly grew in number. The importance of taking a step back from all of that. And, even when you are at a point where it's unmanageable, for me, I realized that, that break to go take a walk, to go for a run, to go practice music, to go do something else other than the work, and just do something that you love to do was so helpful for me. And that, whatever product that you're going to produce from the work that you're doing is ultimately not more important than your mental health and your overall well-being. So I think, going off of that, that's something that I've learned, but moving forward, because that's ultimately what's at stake here in this session. There was, I think it was you, Samantha, who said that, it's, asking how are you or how's it going is almost something that you can't do anymore, just because we're assuming that it's not going well for people, and, that there's so many more things that perhaps aren't going in their favor that are. I think, and there will be, I'm sure, debate on this, but I think that's still important to reach out to people, to ask them how they're doing, because in a time like this, I don't think they're getting that as often anyways. You know, reaching out to your friends, family, you know, relatives, anyone who you know and would, you know, want to see you do well. Reach out to them and check in. I think that's always needed anytime. And it's not to humor the person. It's to genuinely know in a time that you know, we need that more than ever. So that's something that I will personally do, and that I just put out there, and that I think that's important for others to do as well.
I really appreciate that. One of the things I've done this year is I actually schedule in my calendar once every month where I check in with specific people in my life. So thank you for that really, really good tip. Emmanuel, I'm very interested in your reflections.
Yes, thank you. So one thing that I think came out both of this discussion right now, and I think the bigger teaching and learning symposium these last few days is the idea of purpose or intentionality, and going forward, being more careful with what the purpose of everything that we do is. And this can be done at many levels. It can be the course content. What's the purpose of the content? It can be on teaching tools and teaching technique, pedagogical techniques, that you know, just because it's available, should I use it? Maybe not. And then also the technology choice. And this past year, we've kind of made a very rapid choice in technology, but also what's the purpose of each individual technology tools. And there's, you know, even a smaller question, should I use Piazza and not, and so on. So these are the kind of questions that come, and I think every one of us has to go back to what's the purpose, what's the intent, in order to be able to answer those questions.
We think about things we can do to humanize learning and normalize the struggle of learning. That phrase, when we were kids, practice makes perfect. I don't like that phrase at all, because it's really that practice makes progress. And we know that if we normalize the struggle of learning, students are more likely to pick up their midterm and see what they got wrong, and more likely to look at the wrong answers rather than just the grade. And so for me going forward, it would be related to that, normalizing that everyone struggles at learning. You have to figure out where you struggle, and that's what you put your effort into moving forward.
Let me pick up on that point. So I like the idea of struggle. I would change the word challenge. I think it really is the idea of working, you know, learning is hard work, and to do it effectively. And it's the idea of the university should be a place where we challenge ourselves, we challenge each other. The idea that we find we can do something that we didn't think we could do because we were supported. And also, I'd say a takeaway for this is learning about our limits as well. Certainly as instructors, as students, the idea that we do have limits, and part of challenge is knowing how hard to challenge yourself and when and why. And I've heard it from staff, I've heard it from instructors, I've heard it from students. I think we've all felt and learned about our limits in the same process. So we can talk about the idea of student mental health, we can talk about instructor mental health, we can talk about how available we are, but really when it comes down to it, I think it is for us to understand ourselves and to understand others, and introduce this intentionality that Samantha has talked about as well. So with that, I'll pass it back to Samantha, and we're going to open it up to question and answer. Again, I encourage people to put questions in the chat or use your microphones. But one of the goals of the session is for everyone to take away something that they would like to further reflect on and further talk to about, with colleagues. So if you don't have questions or you don't have comments, if you'd like to share something that was a takeaway from this session or takeaway from the symposium, something that you and you'd like others, colleagues, to think about further over the next year, that would be fantastic if you'd like to share that as well. So I'll pass it back to Samantha, and I think at this point we'll open it up to you, our community here, to hear some of your thoughts.
Yes, please pop in your questions or comments, observations in the chat panel. I've noticed there's some conversation about using audio feedback, and I definitely appreciate audio feedback. As I mentioned, you can really hear the nuances in people's voices. My music teacher always says you can tell when someone is smiling through their voice. So I love that idea. And I also really like Eileen Kerr's comment about learning strategists being teaching and learning partners. So making sure that as instructors, we're sharing resources with our students. And then I know that as a grad student, I also often share resources with my cohort as well. So really supporting one another through this journey together, whether there's a pandemic or not. And then also just being more open about the difficulties and challenges. I know that as a grad student, I feel like sometimes I'm not sure which hat I'm wearing. Am I the student, the course instructor, the teaching assistant, or the daughter, or the person who needs to walk the dog? And so I'm flipping, and it's always, I like the idea of transparency and humanizing education, as Fiona has really stressed, and being open about my struggles with my students and my colleagues. I wonder if before there's more questions from the chat panel, if either Fiona, Emmanuel, and Stefan, if there was anything else you wanted to add before that, when we
Well, I'm just looking through the chat, and there's so many good ideas in the chat. So I just appreciate all the contributions made by everybody else in like the responses to the things that we said and all of that. So thank you to the chat, and I look forward to more comments, suggestions, and questions.
I had a question about sort of, do any of you have ideas to create authentic community? Office hour, is not always attractive to all students. I know this was the last 2 years I've rebranded office hours as student hours, and I found that's been a little bit helpful in changing the language that we choose to use. So being flexible and creative about the language and the tones that is set. And I can see that a number of our colleagues have put in some ideas in the chat, but Fiona, Stefan, Emmanuel, authentic community strategies?
Sure, I can give one that I think has been possible because we're online. So we used this feedback from students to questions not related to class. So one question was, what are you most worried about right now? And another one was, how has COVID-19 affected you? Another one was, what brings you hope? Hundred of them anonymously on one slide, and students would use the annotate tool to indicate which ones resonate with them. And then when we did our surveys at the end, the students reported that helped them feel like others were in the same boat, that it was a sense of community. So I think when we ask our students to give us information or get feedback, sharing it back to the class anonymously is really important. So you get that culture of feedback and that culture of dialogue. It can help form that authentic connection.
That's such a fantastic idea about this culture of feedback, and also being intentional in why you're collecting this information. Emmanuel and Stefan, did you want to add a little bit of that? Anything to the ideas of authentic community.
I'll add, I guess, thank you for those ideas and this idea of culture of feedback. I think that many of us this year have been much more, should we say, mindful or careful with that, and this is something that we need to keep, like, not lose, because this year has been new to all of us, both to instructors and to students, and many instructors have tried to see what works and ask students for suggestions and feedback and all of that. And I think this is something that shouldn't be limited to when we teach online, and shouldn't be limited to just when we do something brand new. So this culture of feedback resonates very well with me, with the question of how to avoid at some point survey fatigue and things like that. And for that, I think what Fiona mentioned, that bringing it back to the students is important, not just give us your feedback and then you never hear from it again.
I'll add in one. So the idea of community across the university. So it's not necessarily just community within a course, but it is community within colleagues, community within research groups, community within departments. It's the idea that if we can convey the notion of a common purpose, and that's a purpose of shared exploration and discovery. The idea that we are all learners, and that if you can share that with the students and share that with colleagues, the idea that the challenge we face is the challenge of discovery, the challenge of exploration. It eliminates the this unfortunate stigma of competition that U of T unfortunately is known for, but it's the idea that we are working collectively together towards pushing the boundaries of what we know, what we can do. I certainly found it was challenging in itself to sustain community within research groups, within graduate students, rather than have a community, avoid becoming the focal point where things are going through myself or somebody else. To get people to continue to work together. So by no longer having people interacting with each other spontaneously, which happens in the physical environment, it meant that things challenged more through the instructor, more through the research supervisor. And I think that has been one big lesson about learning about authentic community, is the idea that can we still get people to work together in the university? And I do believe we have an opportunity, but a lot more to learn about how to do that effectively.
Yes, practice is a process, right?
Yes.
I'm also thinking about the idea of challenges. One of the things that I believe all students and faculty members were exploring this year was the various different platforms. And I'm very curious, maybe sort of as we round off the Q&A, I'm curious to hear from all of you. What were your experiences navigating multiple courses using different platforms? Did you find it effective? Did you find it enriching? What are some strategies to really help cope with Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet? What else do we use here? I don't even know. Skype? Does anyone still use Skype? So I wonder who wants to take up this question first.
If I could just, yeah, I've been quiet for a little while now. I also wanted to touch on, and this might overlap with the last question about forming authentic community. But, you know, I saw some points in the chat about, you know, breakout rooms, just open office hours, doesn't have to be like course related. I think it was Fiona who was saying earlier about that student who, you know, showed the, got to show the professor like their family and just around, but you know, that's a different case. But you know, in certain courses that I took, I can speak to the fact that I think breakout rooms were helpful, but really only when they're small enough and the objectives and guidelines are clearly set out. Also, there was, I think the idea of having options to form this community is good, because there's been a recognition across panelists and even attendees that not everyone learns in the same way. I can take speaking in tutorials as an example. That, okay, if you don't want to do that, there's the discussion board for that. And that's completely fine. You can go there. And then in another course I took, in terms of like now navigating all of these different platforms, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Skype, all of that. I have, used pretty much all of them that are out there, mostly Zoom, for courses and whatnot. And so I'm most familiar with Zoom. Microsoft Teams is mostly for like committees, and when I'm committees within the institution. And so I think it's not as bad when you use one platform mainly, and then you use others for particular purposes. I found that that's pretty helpful, but that's also just worked out naturally for me. So I also teach piano. I do that on Zoom, but I use Zoom and Skype and to complement each other in that way. And then for a course I took, this was where it wasn't very ideal. The professor used Pepper in addition to Zoom, and then Top Hat also. That's kind of another platform similar to Quercus, and there was all of these different platforms that we had to keep up with, and we're expected to respond to discussion prompts in addition to speaking in tutorial. So at that point, it really becomes too much when you're expected to use all of these different platforms. So the choice should be there. And, if it's not already set out for you to, use different platforms for different purposes, I think that you should just do that yourself and be like, know how your schedule or your various activities fit in with utilizing these platforms.
Yes, Emmanuel. Thank you for sharing that, Stefan.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. First of all, I just wanted to echo what's been the discussion in the chat about, a big thank you to all the IT support that we have received with all the tools, and Zoom coming in for, I think at least for U of T St. George in August last year, and it's been a great help to have Zoom on top of the other tools that U of T had. So thank you to Avi and the team and everybody. I wanted to mention that on a slightly related note, I taught a number of first-year students this year, and the first discussion board post that I put in September was, talk about the things that are worrying you this year. And many students have said, I'm worried that I can't manage all those platforms. And it wasn't just, Zoom versus BB Collaborate, but it was also like, where are all my deadlines? I thought all my deadlines are in Quercus, but they're not. I'm afraid I'm going to miss a deadline. I'm afraid that the professor is going to have something due in some weird on some weird platform, and I'm going to miss that. So that was the number one worry for first-year students coming to U of T. I asked the same question at the end of the term, saying, what's been worrying you for the last term? And that didn't come up again. So first week in September, they were very worried about that. End of November, I guess early December, they had figured it out. So I just wanted to mention that.
Certainly the chat is just mesmerizing, and I'm proving my comment about the idea that the fallacy of multitasking, following the discussion and following these wonderful comments. I saw a comment from Otto about learning how his jokes can actually be effective online. I think for me, the learning was how much worse my jokes can go over online than even in person. So that's certainly been a big part of the learning. And certainly, as Emmanuel pointed out, but I think we can echo the incredible support from our staff, the IT staff as well. This has really been a shared exercise. So Fiona, I see you've got a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to add about Zoom and platform fatigue, and there were some comments in the chat about that. I think it's really important we try to streamline our students' experience, and it's not just platforms. It can be what the week looks like. So if you have a recurring assignment, it's always due at the same day at the same time, or your week has a similar structure so that the students can get into a rhythm. I think that's something we sometimes forget, but if we can chunk our course into modules, and each module has a very similar rhythm, the students have reported that that's really helpful for them. So I think that's good to consider as we return to some in-person classes, keeping that idea of chunking the modules.
Yeah, I certainly took that strategy, completely redesigned my main large course and made it the weekly modules as well. And there's a need for that throughout the curriculum as well. You want to get a flow, and that's particularly important when you get down to, I can't remember what Stefan called the last March and April senioritis, but I wasn't familiar with the term, but the idea that when you get to that head down period in the year where we're, instructors, students, staff, we're all just trying to get through it, having that flow keeps the momentum and makes it a lot easier.
I can see in the chat a lot of people are resonating with the idea of setting that routine, especially when I don't know if any of you have experienced this. Sometimes I have no idea what day of the week and what hour we're in. I'm just sort of managing a little bit. And I remember this past semester, a student said, I always know it's Monday at 8 because my inbox will ding and it's an announcement from you. So I see that we're reaching the end of this wonderful roundtable, and I want to pass things back to Allison.
Thank you so much, Samantha. This really, really was a wonderful session. Thanks to you and to Greg for your really expert and thoughtful moderation, and thank you to the panelists for your candor and all your ideas. And thanks to all our participants, everybody here today, for all this participation in the chat. I mean, this has really, really been a wonderful conversation. The CTSI folks has been chatting in the background about how we're going to capture all these wonderful ideas and questions and thoughts that have been expressed today. This really has been a wonderful bookend to Newmont's keynote, has come up many times today, and really this year's really forced us back, I think, into that beginner mindset that we talked about Wednesday morning, and clearly we're going to keep learning and adapting as we go forward. I think if we take today's chat and transcript of the session and put it into a word cloud, clearly there's going to be one word that's going to be big and front and center, and that's going to be intentional, or intention. And I think that's a great word to take forward, being intentional, making time for self-care, about what choices we give to students so both instructors aren't overwhelmed and students aren't overwhelmed. Be intentional about how we find community and how we stay connected to the people important to us. Intentional about actively listening to student concerns and their voices, and when we're making all these intentional choices. So thank you to everyone for generously sharing this snapshot of your experience. We are now into the point where we are wrapping up the symposium, and we have many, many people to thank you. I'll start with everyone who's attended all our sessions. The engagement and commitment and connections that I've experienced over these past 2.5 days have really been, as Professor Regier said at the beginning, it's been rejuvenating and absolutely inspiring. And so thank you to everyone who presented your work or led a discussion. I'm looking, my screen looks a little funny. I want to see the slide that Kelly has just posted with some more thank yous and where you can find all the people behind the scenes who've been actively working on the symposium, including the volunteers who led sessions and reviewed proposals and helped us make the difficult decisions about that put our program together. Megan, over
Thank
to
you so much, Allison. And I just noticed that Kelly has shared the webpage. The homepage of the TLS website is now this acknowledgements page. And I invite everyone to take a quick look before you disappear to enjoy this beautiful sunny Friday afternoon. Please look at this page and recognize the work that your colleagues have invested in bringing you this event. I just want to say something. In the past few days, I've heard a lot of people refer to the symposium as the CTSI symposium. It is not the CTSI symposium, although I appreciate the shout out. It's actually a University of Toronto event. This is your symposium. This is your event, and you have contributed to it, and you have made it this fantastic, rich experience this year that we were hoping would happen, and I think has happened. So thank you so much, all of you. But please, please click on your reactions button. Bring up the little bar that has the reactions and click on your hands to clap for Kelly Gordon, our symposium coordinator, who actually brought this into reality. She had never, none of us have ever run a fully online event before of this scale. So kudos to Kelly for all the learning that she undertook with cheer and with energy. And she brought us this fabulous event. And kudos as well to Peter Chung, our colleague working over in academic and collaborative technologies in ITS, who designed a brand new website, built it from scratch. The TLS website is a brand new website. Thank you to Peter and his team, amazing. And Avi Hyman, I just want to give a shout out to you because you said we could do it, that we could actually run this fully online using just Teams and Zoom, and we did it. So I think we've done it. We're almost there. So thank you, Avi, for having faith in us. It's been a real joy. So don't forget to send us your feedback. So this was the first time that we ran the symposium fully online. We want your feedback. We want your thoughts. What worked, what didn't work. You'll see this form. It's on the website, but we're going to send it out in an email right after the closing plenary today. So don't forget to send us your feedback, because there are elements of this symposium this year that we really want to keep. I think it's connecting into that theme of how are we going to carry forward some of the tools that we've used this past year to enhance our teaching going forward. How can we use this past year and the tools that we've learned how to use to enhance the symposium next year? I don't think we want to go back to a symposium that's completely fully in person, maybe. I don't know. We invite your thoughts around that. A note about what's coming next. We want to build on the momentum from the past few days and continue some conversations around what we have learned, particularly around how to stay well. We're still in the middle of this pandemic. So how can we continue to support each other and learn from each other? And I just want to point out that our wonderful teaching fellows are leading a roundtable at the end of May on faculty mental health, which definitely is a theme that came up quite a lot over the past few days. So don't forget to check that out. I will say nothing in writing yet because nothing has been finalized, but we are working very closely with our wonderful colleagues in student life to try to put together an event that brings together faculty and students to talk about the experiences they've learned from in the past year. So look for that. We don't know for sure yet when that will be happening, but we will be broadcasting that soon, promoting it soon rather. So look for that event. And then we're going to be probably building other programming around some of the themes that have come up. This through the symposium. I know that indigenization and talking about the medicine wheel and talking about land acknowledgements, I mean, that theme was very present in this year's symposium. So we're going to be looking at offering some programming in partnership with other offices at U of T around those themes. So look for that. More is coming. Finally, I just wanted to point out that we are offering again this year a online course in partnership with the Association of College and University Educators, which is a very large organization in the United States, but very well respected, has a great reputation, and all their work is very evidence-based and research-based. They are our partner in offering a certificate in effective university instruction, and they're running a course for us this year for U of T faculty on teaching online, effective online teaching practices, which actually works just as well for you if you're going to be in the classroom, if you will be teaching in person at all this coming year. We're asking unit heads to nominate faculty for this course. So we've extended the deadline. The deadline is now Tuesday, May 18th. So if you're interested in this opportunity, you can connect with us for more information, or talk to your unit head and maybe you can have them nominate you if you're a faculty interested in this course. So that's it for this slide. What I can't, like, Wednesday seems a long time ago. Time is very fluid these days, is it not? So thank you so much, all of our panelists and our moderators for the closing panel. Thank you so much for the rich discussion and the wonderful perspectives that you brought to close out this symposium, a very meaningful discussion. And thanks again for sharing your time with us. We really appreciate it. Again, this isn't a CTSI symposium, this is your symposium. You showed up. And we appreciate it. And we had great conversations. And we're so energized by all of this. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you around. And come back and see us in CTSI as soon as you can. We'd love to see you again. Allison, any final thoughts?
Thanks. Megan Gregg asked us to stay, for everybody to stay, so we can get a screenshot. Your classic Zoom screenshot.
Zoom
A
screenshot.
gallery
We
shot.
gotta do it. So can we ask
Greg, you're
everybody who wants?
amazing.
Just turn on their
Awesome.
cameras
Do
and
it.
take a picture if you can take a screenshot. So we'll get one good one from 100.
In the upper right-hand corner, click on view and go to gallery. That's what you want to do. You want the gallery view. And I am taking a picture for sure. Oh, wait.
Are you going to give us a 1, 2, 3?
Okay, everybody, get ready. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Cheers. Bring kids and pets in. Wave if you need to. Fabulous. You're amazing. Wait, I'm gonna advance a couple of pages. Keep waving. Keep smiling. It's all good. Fabulous. Thanks, folks. That's done. Excellent idea, Greg. Thank you for that. So I think that's it. It's been fabulous. Take care, everyone. I'll close with a final word from one of my favorite shows when I was growing up, which is going to reveal how old I am. Hill Street Blues. One of the main characters liked to say at the end of every episode, let's be careful out there. Let's be careful out there and take care of each other. Thanks for being with us. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Take care.